Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, not only have the Lakers hired Darvin Ham, but it appears they have learned some lessons from the missteps of the Frank Vogel era. We will explain next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, and sometimes on weekends when the Lakers have high-profile news dumps like they did this week heading into the Memorial Day weekend. No matter how you get your podcasts, where you get your podcasts, always free, never behind a paywall, and available for you whenever you need it. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to get the podcast a little bit early. You get the video version come replete with views of us before you hear the audio version on most nights. Want to let you know too that Locked On Lakers is brought to you today by Rock Auto. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com and tell them Locked On sent you. So yeah, Andy, heading into the Memorial Day weekend, the Lakers made big news. They hired Darvin Ham, and it was not unexpected, but it was still good to see, only because if there are big voices around LA, Bill Plaschke, for one, from the LA Times, is just as an example, who kind of still talk about the Lakers' job as one that isn't built for first-time head coaches. The Lakers got past that and hired the guy that I think most NBA observers felt was the best fit for what they had.
Yeah, first of all, just to clarify, the Lakers have not officially hired Darvin Ham yet. We expect that the announcement and the introductory press conference will be sometime this week. But just in case fans are wondering why they haven't heard anything yet from the organization, that's why. And likely they don't want to do this during a holiday weekend. They want to, just actually have some attention, because I think especially after what happened the last time they hired a head coach, Frank Vogel, and he ended up a complete afterthought at his own introductory press conference, you want to make sure that you're giving Darvin Ham the proper shine and enthusiasm. And as far as the observers around the league, yeah, I mean, you and I had been very high on Darvin Ham among people linked to this job. I think it's safe to say we were highest on him than anybody that would be considered legitimately attainable.
Of the three finalists, we talked about it last week. Of the three finalists, you and I had Terry Stotts and Kenny Atkinson in different spots in terms of 3 and 2. I had Atkinson at 2. You had Stotts at 2. But we both had Ham at 1 among the three finalists. And, Quinn Snyder wasn't going to be available. Nick Nurse was.
That's my point.
Both of us was walking through that door.
Exactly. Both of us would obviously, were Nick Nurse available, we would have both said, do whatever it takes to get that guy. But he wasn't available, so he doesn't really count. But, this is going to be discussed a lot. And we've seen this come out. Dan Wojcicki and Brad Turner at the LA Times did a really good piece talking with different people from Saginaw, Michigan, where Darvin Ham is from, and, talking about people that knew him coming up. Darvin Ham, I didn't realize this until reading more about him recently. He didn't start playing basketball really till his senior year of high school. Wasn't considered that good his senior year. He was just, and people should read this piece from Dan and Brad, because it's really good.
It's really good.
But he wasn't really considered that good. He was just considered a guy who
he went to his ass. He had a coach who worked, because he respected how hard he worked, and just thought Darvin was a high quality human, not a high quality, not a bad basketball player, but he was just such a high quality person that it was worth going to bat for him to get him into a junior college where he could play. And then eventually he goes and, transfers, makes the NBA as a UFA and all that stuff. And I think some people recognize that that path that he's taken and just the grind that Ham has had to go through to get where he is. But along the way, and I think this is the point of a lot of the pieces, the amount of boxes that he ticks in terms of experiences he understands, people he can relate to, everyone from the dude on the end of the bench to Giannis Antetokounmpo and whomever, Coach Kobe Bryant, like he has seen the full range of everything that a head coach of a team like the Lakers would need to see.
This is a great quote in Dan and Brad's piece from Chauncey Billups, who played with Darvin Ham on that 2004 Pistons team that beat the Lakers in the finals. I'm sure if you talk to the guys that he played with, sorry, he was probably their favorite teammate type dude. He was always so competitive. He brought the heat to practice every day. Every time he got in the game, he just raised the level of play. He's the man. Not one person would say anything bad about him. He's that guy. And you know what it reminds me of, Brian, a little bit is when you and I covered the 2009 and 2010 championship teams, Kobe's relationship with Josh Powell, because Josh Powell was an undrafted free agent who bounced around the league, and he was a bit reserve player on those championship teams. Kobe loved Josh Powell. I mean, he talked him up a lot. I remember what Phil actually did a picture book. It was actually a really cool book. I probably photos with Andy Bernstein of one of the championship seasons. And when Phil was going through the proofs, he actually told Andy Bernstein, include more pictures of Josh. There's not enough in there, because he's one of those guys that by NBA standards, he was limited talented wise, but he ringed every ounce of his NBA talent and brought every single ounce of it onto the court. And guys like Kobe, Phil Jackson, all of those guys respected Powell so much. Ham reminds me a lot of that.
It's because guys like Kobe. One of my favorite parts of the Kobe mythology was always how he would like to, because it was one of those things that got him to get up at 4 a.m. and do all this,
psychopathic stuff,
psychotic stuff that he would
yes.
do to, part of his self-delusion was convincing himself that he didn't have the natural talent, that he didn't have the natural gifts. But deep down at his core, Kobe knew that he was blessed in ways that most players in the NBA weren't. And what made him transcendent was there are a lot of guys who have Kobe's physical ability, and those guys can often become all-stars. Kobe turned himself into an all-time great by working as hard as a Darvin Ham while having the natural talent. But I think that's what gravitates guys like him, guys like LeBron and whatever, who combine those two things, coaches like Darvin Ham, because they understand what that work is, and they understand what it is to stick in this league as long as Ham did, as long as a Josh Powell did, without the gift of natural talent at that level. I mean, people know what I mean,
right? But then along the same lines, Darvin Ham was somebody that put in the grind as an assistant coach with the Lakers, with the Hawks, most recently with the Bucks, and along the way, he's always just built up more and more respect. I mean, he's somebody that you and I have heard about. I mean, not just because we were around him a bit when he was on the Lakers staffs. You heard his name for years as this guy
will be a head coach.
Right.
This guy will be a head coach.
And the difference between, and this is something that Bill Plaschke has harped on, and, we like Bill a lot on a personal level, but we just think he's flat out wrong with this. He's harped on the idea of Luke Walton was a first-time head coach, and everybody had always talked up Luke as this coach in the making, and it turned out it didn't happen. He was a coach on the floor while he was a player. And, maybe some of this was Luke never being in the right circumstances, but the big difference between Luke and Darvin Ham is Luke gained that perception largely as a player, as opposed to what you saw him do as a coach. Darvin Ham has created this perception because of what people have seen him do in the coaching job. And there's a huge difference.
And there is, but also too, it's you can be wrong. Darvin might be a good coach. He might not be a good coach. Luke, I think, turned out to be not as good. I think in the right situation, Walton could be as good as most coaches in the NBA who are in that category of give them a good roster. And I don't think Luke is necessarily a terrible coach, and I hope he gets another opportunity. That Lakers team that he got a chance to coach with that era was not terribly functional. And they went to Sacramento. So I
where
hope
functionality goes to die.
Yes, I hope he gets another opportunity. But retreads fail too. Second time guys fail too. Third time guys fail. That's why they're retreads. They keep getting there's no way to know. And I think, one of the qualities that seems to come through, and we'll get to some of the things that really speak well to how the Lakers have handled the Darvin Ham hire here in a second. The last thing I want to say about this, though, is that Darvin, I think, because of who he is and because of the path that he's taken, much like the way that Frank Vogel did his job in LA, when you have to grind the way that you do, you develop a certain confidence in what you are and who you are and what you have to say and your own abilities and the work that you've done. And he's not a guy, like, if you go through everything that everybody says, he is extraordinarily direct. He's a great communicator, a good teacher, makes you feel appreciated, makes you feel wanted and loved and all of that stuff. But he is not going to BS his way around anyone. He is not going to be intimidated by the star players. He is not going to back off of his job because of LeBron James or because of Anthony Davis or whatever. And that makes these guys want to be coached by him. I think that's a critical quality. The Lakers, as reported by Mark Stein and others, have made significant improvements in what they're going to be asking their coach to do and how they're going to do it. And we will explain that next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Prize Picks. Okay, Laker fans, you've been hearing me talk about Prize Picks for months. And if you have not signed up yet, the hell's the matter with you? Because Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You're going to love this app for NBA and also mixed sport pick'ems. And for a limited time, no-brainer offer for our users. Users get $50 for free to play with if a player in your first Prize Picks entry scores a single point. Like, go Jason Tatum, go Steph Curry. Like, there's the cheat code. Not even that hard to figure out. But you got to use the code NBA. It's an exclusive offer available for Locked On fans only who use the code NBA. Prize Picks has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator. You get the star players. You also get bench players as an option. The guys are just back into the bench, only a handful of minutes, their options. And the mixed sport entries allows you to go, say, the over on Steph Curry 3-pointers made with the under on Mookie Betts triples, like whatever. I would definitely bet the under. They don't happen often.
No.
Again, it's the under. So use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's easy. Prize Picks, it's safe. They offer fast withdrawals. So again, prizepicks.com. Use the promo code NBA or go to the App Store, download the app. If you're not playing Prize Picks, you don't know what you're missing.
All right. So the Lakers took some flack, I would say, Andy, fair to say, for the handling of the Frank Vogel departure, but also for the handling of the Frank Vogel
arrival.
Departure. What's the word for while the guy is working? The presence of Kurt Rambis.
Brian, they took criticism for the way they hired Frank Vogel, for the way Frank Vogel was treated while employed, and for his firing. Just those areas.
Right. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln.
Yeah.
So Mark Stein, in his newsletter, which, as we've noted, his Substack, I realize people have subscription fatigue. If you are an NBA person who subscribes to NBA Substacks and you are not subscribing to Mark Stein, you're doing it wrong.
I mean, look how lost we'd be if we didn't.
No, seriously. Particularly for Lakers reporting, because Mark, people may not realize, used to cover the Lakers back in the three-peat era, and is still very well connected here. So you get great Lakers insight. He noted a few things. Kurt Rambis sitting in too many meetings. Frank Vogel didn't get a long enough contract. Let's see. Didn't get to pick a staff either, really. Had a lot of that prescribed for him. None of that, Andy, is happening with Darvin Ham. He got a 4-year deal, which is a year longer than I think what is considered to be the minimum for first-time head coaches. So Darvin got the
or
fourth
Frank
year.
Vogel.
Or Frank Vogel. Or But as somebody pointed out on Twitter, we know it's not a series of 4 1-year contracts. I apologize for not remembering who it was exactly, but that was a great answer. So yes, we don't know for sure it's not 4 1-year contracts, but we believe it's a 4-year contract.
4 team options,
right? Ham will reportedly, from Stein and others, be allowed to choose his own staff, and Kurt Rambis, or his doppelganger Flirt Gambus, will not be sitting in as many meetings. So the narc basically is not going to be in the coaching. These are all things that should be obvious, but haven't been. And the Lakers apparently got the message and are fixing it.
Yeah, I mean, the only downside is Linda Rambis will have full autonomy to choose whatever offense Darvin Ham's going to run.
Right. She is the new lead assistant. But
right. But once she's made up her mind, total autonomy for Ham, and hands off from Kurt Rambis. He's going to be leaving it alone.
Two things could
happen. 4 people freak out. That's a joke.
That's a joke.
That's a joke. I shouldn't have to clarify
I'm not sure.
it.
And this is important. And I think this is a testament to our work, because there are times, Andy, when we are joking. And my preferred delivery for a lot of these things, I think it's fair to say, is fairly dry. Mm-hmm. People don't always know that I'm telling the joke. So sometimes we have to point it out. We are not being serious. Linda Rambis is not going to be the lead assistant. Couple things could have happened here. First, the Lakers could be afraid of the bad PR that would have come with losing Ham to, say, the Hornets, because they said you can only have 3 years, or you can't. We're going to ask a couple people to be on your staff, or Kurt gets to sit in the meetings. Maybe they were afraid of the bad PR. Or maybe they learned their lessons, and that was just realized that was a bad way to handle it. I don't care. The point is, if they're doing the right thing, how they get there, to me, I'm not really that concerned. I just care that they're in the right spot. I prefer they get there by learning their lesson, but as long as they're in the right place, it's an improvement.
Yeah, the biggest reason I would care about them actually learning their lesson is if they haven't, it could potentially mean that if for whatever reason Darvin Ham doesn't work out, it will become that much easier for them to say, we told y'all, and we were right all along. And the one time we strayed away from our way of doing this, it went sideways, as opposed to the other ways.
If only Kurt had been allowed in the meetings, we would have won 70 games.
We sacrificed all this stability we've had with coaches to do it the way everyone else told us to do it, and look what happened. But so, I mean,
that's another joke, by the way.
Well, but also too, it would be good. It would be good for them to have learned their lesson, because maybe they will recognize that, some people think coaching matters more than other people at this level. And a lot of times it depends on how the team is constructed. A lot of times it depends on who is coaching, where the team is at, whatever. But it does matter to some degree. And it's felt like for so long that the Lakers have treated this like a disposable position, because they were ultimately, as an organization, more important than whoever they'd end up hiring, or the stars that they put on the roster were more important.
It's almost a baseball-like approach to the head coach of the NBA. And baseball, which isn't to say a guy like Dave Roberts isn't important as a manager of people, but that's in a lot of ways what that job has become. You are a manager of people, and on the Dodgers, that's not an easy job, because a lot of high-profile people that you're dealing with.
It's a long-ass season too, man.
Too long. But the on-field decisions that are being made are much more now made by collaboration between the front office and the coaching staff, made by data and all these other things. It's a different deal than baseball, or than the NBA. But the Lakers almost felt like they had that kind of approach, where our data, our stars, like you say, are just more important. And I think it's, I said this last week when we were scouting Darvin Ham. I don't know what his X's and O's acumen translates into as a head coach. Supposedly, he really blew the Lakers away in that regard, and that's good. Ultimately, Darvin Ham is a manager of people and a manager of stars, and that's a huge part of this game. And guys who are less great on X's and O's get help from their assistant coaches. But I feel like the Lakers found a guy with some upside and are going to get out of the way. And if it works out, everybody wins. If it doesn't work out, at least they're going with the right process.
Well, it depends. Yeah. I mean, the fallout from it not working out, if it didn't, depends a lot on the reasons why it didn't work out.
But I mean,
they're not
going to not work out because Kurt wasn't in a meeting.
Well, it's not going, if it doesn't work out, they're not going to get killed for hiring Darvin Ham, because that is what everybody was telling them to do. And in terms of the available options, it's not like they passed on somebody that was really proven as a championship level coach that was just out there, and the Lakers refused to either pay that guy or refused to give him the staff that they wanted or whatever. Like, Darvin Ham was, I think, universally considered, if not the best candidate out there for the Lakers to hire, top two, the lowest,
top three at the worst.
Like, in terms of, again, guys that were legitimately
to do the Patino game thing, the proverbial Pat Riley was not walking through that door.
Yeah, exactly.
There is another wrinkle to this, though, that I think is actually kind of important. You talk about getting blamed and stuff like that, about the perception of Darvin around the league and his qualifications. I actually think is really important to this conversation. And then the biggest issue facing the Lakers following the coaching hire. So we'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you would need in a traditional chain storefront. And who cares? Because why would you spend 30%, 50%, 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway, you mark? You fool, you sucker, because you can get it for far less at rockauto.com. For example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 on average at a chain store. That's a ripoff, because you can get it for $216 at Rock Auto. They are a family business. They've been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. And whether it's for a classic or a daily driver, you can get everything you need delivered directly to your door in a few easy clicks. It's simple, and it's way more of an enjoyable experience than going into one of those stores and having them just try to upsell you and bug you and treat you like you're an idiot. So go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or your truck, right? Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
Okay, so before we get to the sad reality, I think, from a weekend of, I would say, happiness for Lakers fans.
Great news.
I think most people were very pleased with this hiring. I mean, if you prefer Terry Stotts, maybe you like Kenny Atkins, whatever. I think most Lakers fans are very pleased with this hire, pleased with the process, pleased with the reports from guys like Stein that have come out after about like what Ham is getting. Like, I think everybody's really happy with this, as they should be.
Yep.
There's one aspect of this, though, that I think has not been reported on or not been talked about as much that I do think is important. And you mentioned in the last segment that nobody's going to kill the Lakers for hiring Ham. I think that's 100% true. That doesn't mean the season is going to go in a way that the Lakers want. Up to this point, the reporting has been that, Pelinka is going to get this year. And if it doesn't go well, his status may be very much up in the air. One underreported, underrated aspect of Ham's sort of universality, his flexibility, his versatility, his respect from players to agents to GMs and executives. If they have to replace Pelinka after this season, you want a guy who the next GM could walk into and be like, I'm okay with that as my head coach, with that guy as my head coach. Mike D'Antoni is reportedly a finalist for the job in Charlotte. I like Mike. But Mike D'Antoni is a very specific hire. You hire him with a very specific idea in mind, And another GM might not want that. If the Lakers hired somebody like Mike D'Antoni and Rob Pelinka got fired, the next GM might not want to not want D'Antoni as his head coach. And then you either limit your GM pool or you have to fire your coach again. None of those things are good. So I think Ham is also a good bet for if the Lakers do have to replace their front office, their basketball ops next year, to have continuity that goes forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can always get those GMs who want to hire their own
coaches. Want their own
like
guy.
Yes. Right. And that happens all the time. It can be very important to certain guys. I think it's safe to say it was very important to Magic when he was still with this organization, because it did not take long for him to very publicly undercut Luke Walton and make it clear he had no confidence in him. But Ham, I think you're right that he feels like as good a bet for GM TBD to at least want to give a chance, because you're talking about a young coach with a lot of room to grow that had been seen as somebody with a lot of potential, and that's somebody that you could theoretically grow into with your organization. And I think it also helps too that Darvin Ham has a reputation for being very easy to work with, because in terms of that scenario you're talking about, because when you mentioned like Mike D'Antoni, for example, and like you, I liked Mike when we covered him, but D'Antoni is this weird combination of very affable and I think also very hard to work with.
Yeah, and that's separate from his, like, if you have D'Antoni as your coach, you need to build a specific team to work with that. And it's not a knock on Mike, but it is a reality. And you just like we mock the Lakers for being cheap and this and that, whatever all the time. But it is legitimate when if you have to fire Pelinka next year and you bring it is a legitimate thing to be like, look, our head coach has 3 years left on his contract. We're not firing him. You need to be comfortable with this guy as the head coach if you want to take the job. Probably 75% of the people that they would, don't care. They'll take the Lakers executive job or whatever, but you don't want to cross anybody good off your list because of an externality like that. Like, it's comes with a requirement to this job that I don't want in terms of the head coach. So I don't think that will be a problem if the Lakers need to fire Pelinka, and hopefully they won't have to, because if they don't fire Rob, it means the season went reasonably well.
Yeah, I agree with you. The scenario you're talking about, Ham seems like as good of a guy to have in that coaching spot to try to avoid as much turmoil as you can.
So that brings me to the problem. Speaking of Rob, we've often described the trading for Anthony Davis as the easiest thing that Pelinka ever had to do as GM of the Lakers.
It's because it was.
I didn't say we were wrong. Setting up my point here. If you just want to use just this summer, the hiring of Darvin Ham was the easy part. Ham is going to succeed or fail based on the roster that he's given, and the Lakers still have enormous challenges facing them with the roster. That is the really hard part that is now facing Pelinka, and it is independent of Ham's quality as a head coach. If they give Ham what Vogel had last year, the Lakers are going to have a really bad year, and there's not much he can do about it.
I think we're going to end up saving a lot of the Russell Westbrook conversation from Mark Stein's Substack for tomorrow's show.
Sure.
But in where Russ...
We've only got like 2 minutes. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But like where Russ fits into all this, he is the loudest problem that the Lakers have right now. What to do with him? Can you get a deal that actually works for the Lakers? If you have to keep him, can you try to make it work on the team? Like, these are legitimate issues for the Lakers to figure out. And it is absolutely not insignificant. Russ, though, I think is more the loudest problem, certainly more than the only problem. I would argue Russ is not even the biggest problem the Lakers are going to have to figure out for next season.
They have the big three on the roster. they have Austin Reeves, Kendrick Nunn coming off an injury, THT, who is a gigantic question mark, Wenyen Gabriel, and Stanley Johnson. Those are the only players that they control. Gabriel and Johnson, you can argue about them where are end of the rotation to
back of the rotation,
play when guys are injured type players. Austin Reeves, jury's out a little bit on what he is. Rotation guy, maybe. Okay. I'm willing,
but not a guy that you want to have to rely on
right.
for
And you
major
also,
minutes.
Reeves is older. And so while I think he's got the kind of game that will age and do well with good teams because he's more smart and basketball IQ than he is, just raw athleticism and talent. He's better than he gets credit for, because of the runs good rounds, has good hands factor. But that's not who he is. He's not going to grow into an all NBA player. And then you have the stars. And that's
their two stars, their two biggest stars, you have concerns about them staying on the court.
Yes. They don't have 5 reliable NBA players on the roster as it currently stands. Genuinely, I feel good about that. I'm including AD and LeBron, obviously. I'm including Russ. I'm including Reeves. After that, I'm not sure what they have. Kendrick Nunn comes back healthy. Okay, now you got 5. THT, 6, 5.5, 6. But what is THT? We don't have to answer any of these things.
Well, no. What I was going to say though, with THT, it's not even so. With THT, it's not even so much the question of whether he is or is not a reliable NBA player. I would say he is. The problem is, you don't know if he's an NBA player reliably for this roster.
Sure.
And that's all that matters.
That's all that is all that matters. And is he is anywhere right now based on how he played last year, like a 6th man, maybe a starter in the right lineup, but like a 6th man to like a 12th man. That's hard to pin down. That is the problem that the Lakers have. I agree with you, more than Westbrook thing.
And the avenues to fix that are so limited.
Correct. Even if they can figure out how to do this, people are you keep Malik Monk. Okay, keeping Malik Monk would be a good thing. Definitionally, it does not make you better. It allows you to not get worse, maybe, but you don't get better by keeping one of your guys from last year. You stay the same. And so that's the problem that Pelinka's got to solve. He didn't solve it by hiring Darvin Ham. And that is the difficult thing facing the Lakers going forward, and what we will continue talking about as the offseason progresses. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little bit faster than the pure audio version. Subscribe there. It's also where you go to get breaking news as it happens, which will be a big deal going forward into the offseason. Thanks again to everybody for subscribing to that channel. It's up over 6,000 subscribers, which we're really excited about. Obviously starting from 0, less than a year ago. So we're really excited and appreciate all the support we're getting over there. Keep the comments coming at Cam Brothers on that Locked On Lakers YouTube page, and certainly on our iTunes page, Locked On Lakers iTunes, and all that. So we will see everybody on Wednesday.